4,000 years ago, a decision made in a tent divided the world into two irreconcilable halves. That decision did not occur in a parliament or on a battlefield, but in the womb of a woman named Sarah. What official history does not teach you is that the conflict between Israel and Iran began long before modern states. He wasn't born in 1948 or during the 1979 Islamic Revolution. He was born in the desert, crying like an abandoned child. There is an invisible line that connects that ancient cry with the missiles that today cross the burning sky of the Middle East. If you understand what happened between two brothers 40 centuries ago, you will understand the world you see in the news. The truth that no one tells you is that today's leaders are acting out a script that was written in Genesis millennia ago. This is not just a religious narrative. It is the genetic map of the most enduring and deep-seated hatreds in human history. Every war, every sanction, every speech of hate has its roots in a promise that God made to a single man. That man was named Abraham, and his decisions created a family tree that bleeds to this day without ceasing. Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldeans, a prosperous city of the ancient Sumerian Empire in what is today southern Iraq. According to the sacred texts of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, God spoke to him directly and made him a promise. He promised him a land, a countless descendants like the stars, and that all nations would be blessed. But Abraham had a devastating problem. His wife Sarah was barren, and the years went by without the heir arriving. The wait turned into desperation, and desperation led Sarah to make a decision that would change history. Sarah offered her husband her Egyptian slave, a young woman named Hagar, so that he could have a child through her. If she became pregnant and something beyond a child was born, the first major conflict of the sacred lineage emerged. The Bible says, Hagar, realizing she was pregnant, looked at her mistress with contempt, prompting a harsh response from Sarah. Abraham, caught between the two women, handed Hagar's fate to Sarah, who treated her with such extreme cruelty that the Egyptian slave fled to the desert alone, pregnant, without water or food, towards an almost certain death. But then something extraordinary happened. An angel appeared to him by a spring in the Negev desert. The angel said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit, for from your womb a son will be born whom you shall name Ishmael." The name Ishmael in Hebrew literally means God listens, and that divine promise sealed a very different destiny. However, the angel added words that have been resonating for millennia, like a prophecy of perpetual and inevitable war. He said that Ishmael would be a wild man, his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him, in perpetual enmity. When Hagar returned to camp, she gave birth to Ishmael, and Abraham recognized him as his son at 86 years old. 13 long years passed in which Ishmael was the only heir, and Abraham loved him with all the strength of his old heart. 13 years in which Ishmael grew up believing that he would be the continuer of the divine promise made to his father Abraham. But then, what no one expected happened. Sarah, at the age of 90, miraculously became pregnant. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born, and Sarah's laughter upon hearing the news gave the newborn his name. Isaac means he laughs in Hebrew, but that laughter marked the beginning of the end of Ishmael's safe and peaceful childhood. The Bible describes the exact moment when the fracture became irreversible was during the great weaning feast. Sarah saw Ishmael mocking or playing with Isaac, and she demanded something from Abraham, that broke the heart of the elderly patriarch. He demanded that she expel Hagar and Ishmael, that the son of the slave woman would not inherit alongside his own promised son. Abraham loved Ishmael. The Bible clearly states it, and Sarah's request seemed very serious to him. But God spoke to Abraham that night, telling him to listen to Sarah, for in Isaac his descendants would be called. He said, "I will also make a nation from the son of the slave woman, for he is your descendant. I will protect and bless him." The next morning, with a broken heart, Abraham gave Hagar and Ishmael bread and a skin of water and sent them away. He sent them alone to the desert of Beersheba, a barren and merciless land where death lurked in every burning dune. When the water ran out, Hagar placed the child under a bush and moved away so as not to see her beloved son die. The Bible states, "He cried out. God heard the child's voice, and the angel of God called to her from heaven." God showed him a well of water, saved their lives, and promised that he would make Ishmael a great nation in the vast desert. Ishmael grew up in the Paran desert, became an expert archer, and took a wife from the distant lands of Egypt. Arab and Islamic scholars identify Ishmael as the direct ancestor of the Arab peoples and the Bedouins. The Quran presents him not as a rejected one, but as an honorable prophet who, along with Abraham, raised the Kaaba in Mecca. In Islam, the narrative is reversed. It was not Isaac, but Ishmael who was the son that Abraham was about to sacrifice to God. This seemingly small theological difference has geopolitical consequences of a magnitude that cannot be underestimated. It means that each tradition claims to be the legitimate line of the covenant, the true descent of the divine promise. Ishmael and Isaac represent two branches of the same tree that have competed for the same sacred inheritance since the first day. But the story of the conflicts in Abraham's lineage does not end here. There is a second fracture that is even deeper. Isaac married Rebekah, and she was also barren for many years before the miracle came to her womb. When she finally became pregnant, she felt the children fighting inside her with such violence that she went to consult. And God answered him with one of the most disturbing prophecies of the Old Testament, direct and without any ambiguity. He said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, two peoples will be divided from your insides, and the older will serve the younger." Twins were born. The first one came out reddish and covered in hair, and they named him Esau, which means the hairy one or the red one. The second one came out holding onto his older brother's heel, and he was named Jacob, whose name means the one who supplants. From the very moment of her birth, the struggle that Rebekah had felt in her womb took human form and received a proper name. Esau became a skilled hunter, a man of the open field, his father Isaac's favorite, who loved wild game. Jacob was calm, lived in the tents of the camp, and was his mother Rebekah's favorite, who knew the prophecy. The first great betrayal occurred one day when Esau came home exhausted from the field and found Jacob cooking a red stew. He begged his brother to give him something to eat, and Jacob, with calculated coldness, demanded the birthright in exchange. Esau, starving and not valuing what he could neither see nor touch, gave up his birthright for a simple bowl of stew. The Bible harshly adds that Esau despised his birthright, sealing his own fate with his gluttony. But the most devastating betrayal came later, when Isaac was old and his eyes had dimmed with age. Isaac wanted to bless his eldest son before dying, and he asked Esau to hunt and prepare his favorite dish. Rebekah heard everything and executed a bold plan, dressing Jacob in his brother Esau's clothes to carry out the deception. He covered his arms with goat skin, and Jacob presented himself to his blind father, pretending to be his older brother, the firstborn. Isaac touched the hairy arms, hesitated for a moment upon recognizing Jacob's voice, but in the end, he blessed him in his name. Isaac blessed Jacob with the most powerful words a father could utter: "You shall be the Lord of your own brothers." When Esau returned and discovered the deception, the Bible says he let out a cry so bitter that it filled the entire tent. He said, "He has usurped me twice, took my birthright, and now has taken my blessing." And that wound never healed. Esau swore in his heart to kill Jacob as soon as Isaac died, and Rebekah immediately sent her younger son far away from there. Jacob fled alone with his staff, and on the way he had one of the most famous dreams in all of universal sacred history. He dreamed of a ladder that reached up to the sky, with angels going up and down, and God speaking to him from the highest point. God confirmed the Abrahamic covenant to you. "The land you walk on, I will give to you and your descendants, like the sand of the sea." Jacob worked 14 years for the love of Rachel, was deceived, blessed with 12 children, and returned wealthy 2 decades later. But before reuniting with Esau, Jacob had to face something even more terrifying than his own brother's hatred. The night before the meeting, a mysterious being wrestled with Jacob until the first light of dawn painted the horizon. At dawn, the being touched Jacob's thigh and dislocated it, but Jacob did not let go until he granted him his blessing. He said to him, "You will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and men, and have prevailed." Israel means the one who struggles with God, and that name became the name of an entire nation and its conflict. The meeting with Esau was surprisingly peaceful in appearance, and the 2 brothers embraced each other, crying together there. But their paths parted forever. Jacob went west to Canaan, and Esau went south to the lands of Seir. Seir became Edom, the land of the Edomites, descendants of Esau the Red, the people stripped of their heritage. The Edomites and the Israelites lived in constant tension for centuries, with wars and rivalries seemingly without end. When Babylon destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BC, the Edomites celebrated and collaborated with the invader. The book of Obadiah is a cry for divine vengeance against Edom, for rejoicing in the downfall of its unfortunate brother. But what does all this have to do with the conflict between Israel and Iran in the 21st century of our era? The answer requires following the thread of history several centuries forward, to the Persian Empire at its peak. Iran is the biblical Persia, the kingdom that in the 6th century before Christ ruled the world from India to Ethiopia. In the court of the Persian king Xerxes lived a figure that the Bible presents as the first great enemy of the Hebrew people. His name was Haman the Agagite, explicitly identified as a descendant of Agag, the king of the ancient Amalekites. The Amalekites were descendants of Amalek, the grandson of Esau, the stripped brother, the ancestral bearer of eternal hatred. In the book of Esther, Haman holds the 2nd highest position in the empire, and everyone must bow before him by decree. But a Jew named Mordecai, from the tribe of Benjamin, a direct descendant of Jacob Israel, refused to bow down. Mordecai's refusal ignited in Haman a fury that was not just personal. It was the continuation of a generational hatred. Haman did not want to kill just Mordecai. He decided to exterminate all the Jews of the Persian Empire, down to the last one. He convinced King Xerxes to sign the decree of extermination by arguing that the Jews did not obey the king's laws. He set the day of extermination by casting lots, called Pur, and that name gave rise to the Jewish holiday of Purim. But the story took an unexpected turn thanks to a young woman who had hidden her true identity in the royal palace. Her name was Esther, the niece of Mordecai, and King Ahasuerus had chosen her as his queen, completely unaware of her origins. Mordecai sent him a devastating message. Don't think that just because you are in the palace, you will escape when all the others die. He told her that perhaps she had come to royalty precisely for a moment like this, to save her people from extermination. Esther risked her life by approaching the king without being summoned, something that under Persian law could cost her life. The king extended his golden scepter as a sign of clemency, and Esther began the most difficult diplomatic maneuver of her life. In the end, Haman's plot was exposed before the king, and the monarch ordered him to be hanged on the gallows he had built himself. The Jews were allowed to defend themselves, and Haman, along with his 10 sons, were executed that same day in history. The connection between Esau, Amalek, Agag, and Haman forms in rabbinic texts a genealogical chain of hatred towards Israel. And that genealogical chain is what Jewish religious thinkers use to this day to interpret the threat. In the sermons of the synagogues in Israel, the parallel between Haman and the current Iranian leaders is mentioned literally. Israeli rabbis and religious leaders have explicitly compared the leaders of Iran to Haman the Agagite. Former President Ahmadinejad stated on multiple public occasions that Israel should be completely wiped off the map. Her words triggered in the Jewish collective memory the same existential alarm as Haman's decree of extermination. It is not historical paranoia. It is a cultural tool that turns the distant past into an interpreter of the immediate present. From the Iranian side, the narrative also has deep roots that go beyond the politics of the 20th century. The Persian Empire was the first great power to decree that the Jews could return to their land after the long captivity. Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, is the only Gentile explicitly called Messiah in all of the Hebrew Bible and its texts. The Book of Ezra narrates how Cyrus ordered the reconstruction of the Temple of Jerusalem, funded by the Persian treasury. For centuries, Persia and Israel had relations that fluctuated between strategic alliance and tense coexistence. The modern rupture began with the Islamic Revolution of 1979, when Ayatollah Khomeini took complete power. Before 1979, Israel and Iran were strategic allies under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi during decades of cooperation. The revolution transformed the historical ally into an existential enemy and gave the conflict a new theological dimension. The regime of the Ayatollahs has been defined since its founding as the natural and irreconcilable enemy of modern Zionism. But the Shiite leaders added to that political enemy an eschatological dimension of enormous depth and symbolic power. In Shia eschatology, the destruction of the Zionist enemy is part of the process leading up to the return of the hidden Imam. That is to say, the conflict with Israel is not only political, but part of a cosmic drama of redemption and the end of times. Every year during Purim, the Book of Esther is read in Israel to remember Persia's attempt to exterminate the Jewish people. The festival of Purim is not just a joyful celebration, it is the annual update of the memory of the Persian danger. When Netanyahu presented a map of Iran with a red line drawn at the UN, many saw the echo of the Book of Esther. What appears to be a modern geopolitical crisis is the continuation of a narrative written in the desert millennia ago. The conflict is not just about oil. It is not solely about territory, nor the result of decisions made in the 20th century. It is the contemporary expression of a rivalry that was born when Hagar cried in a desert under the same scorching sun. It is the amplified echo of the promise that an angel pronounced over a child in a lost oasis 4,000 long years ago. It is the wound that never healed between the son of the slave and the son of the promise, between the outcast and the chosen heir. It is the cry of Esau upon discovering his brother's deception, a cry that still resonates in the speeches of leaders today. It is Mordecai's refusal to bow before power, and the fury it ignited in the heart of a man named Haman. Each generation believes it fights for land, for security, for ideology, or for religion, and all those reasons are real. But beneath all those reasons, there is something older, more visceral, and harder to deactivate than any treaty. There is a story of children who felt that what was rightfully theirs was taken from them, and that debt was never settled. Peoples, like individuals, carry generational traumas that their leaders turn into foreign policy and war. The psychology of dispossession is so powerful that it can keep a conflict alive for 40 centuries with total intensity. Understanding all of this does not mean justifying any side. It means understanding the root in order to envision the real solution. Because no conflict that was born in the heart can be resolved solely with weapons, borders, or UN resolutions. The true origin of the hatred between Israel and Iran is not in oil or the UN, it is in the cry of a child. If you want to continue uncovering the secrets that official history hides from you, subscribe and activate the bell now.